Hello everyone, my name is Merwa and I am a university student hoping to be a history teacher one day. So I've been really enjoying learning through the series and looking at these different moments within Canadian history that I wasn't really familiar with. So in this week's video, we're looking at a few passages from John Tanner's biography, which is titled A Narrative of the Captivity and the Adventures of John Tanner. And it's with Pyle, who is a postdoctoral fellow in American Indian Studies at the University of Illinois. So in their conversation, Kai and Dr. Kachara bring to life these two Indigenous figures, Netnoque and Ozawandib, and they also provide insights into Indigenous life within the 19th century. So in the first passage, I was really captivated by John Tanner's description of Netnoque. He says, "I have never met with an Indian, either man or woman, who had so much authority as Netnoque. She could accomplish whatever she pleased, either with the traders or the Indians, probably in some measure because she never attempted to do anything which was not right and just." I think this is such a beautiful description of an empowered woman, especially in a time that we normally associate with the oppression of women. And even going off of Kai's explanation in the video, you see the fluidity and the diversity in the roles that Netnoque took up. So she was a prominent chief, she was a political figure, and she was also a mother, and she was the caretaker of her family when her husband passed away. And she was also an active community member. And even in that passage on Ozawandib, you see the way that marriage is presented, which is very different than what we're thinking of in this time period. So the fact that Ozawandib is the one who ends up approaching John Tanner, or the fact that Ozawandib was married multiple times, or even how she was trying to assess whether John Tanner was marriage material by, seeing if he was a good hunter or not. These are all things I don't think that we associate with women during this time, especially someone who would identify as transgender or two-spirit. And I think this is because we're kind of clouded by these Eurocentric historical narratives. And in reading these passages and going through the video, I started to notice how oh, this is not really what it looked like for everybody, and kind of the shattering of all these Eurocentric historical narratives. The last line in the passage also really caught my eye. When John Tanner's kind of explaining Netnoque's activism. He says that she's driven by justice, and I think it speaks to her character and why she was chosen as a political leader in a community. And even in her confrontation with the French, you see that fearlessness in her, and I think that this is just such a beautiful example of womanhood. And even though we don't have that much information or that many sources on Netnoque, this is probably the only source we will find on her. Within this, there's so much that we can see as what womanhood looked like during a different time period, and how she's just such a great role model for us even today. I love the part of the video where Kai and Dr. Kachara are explaining the value of examining Canadian history through an Indigenous perspective and how it changes the narratives that we have, not of only Indigenous histories, but of LGBTQ+ histories and women's histories, which we see as either non-existent or marked by oppression and persecution and powerlessness. And because our present is framed by the past, it makes us wonder if these histories were all taken into account, what would our world look like? And having these sources that we can kind of look into and find these moments, I think Kai phrased it beautifully when he said they're bright spots of positivity and interesting phenomena within history. And I think this really emphasized to me that history and progress are not these neat and linear processes, even though maybe some of us wish it to be, or that is how we are taught, or at least I found in my history learning. After watching the video, one thing that I realized is that oftentimes when I look back at Indigenous histories, I find myself focusing on or looking for the oppression and persecution that Indigenous communities experienced, as if that's the only dimension that defines Indigenous experiences in the past. And I think that speaks to how much of my understanding of Indigenous history comes from this deficit lens and how we are taught about Indigenous history. And in these passages, though, we see that, Netnoque and Ozawandib, they didn't let colonial forces define their being, and even, their identity as women, or in Ozawandib's case, a transgender or a two-spirit person, these are only one aspect of their identity and their otherwise full lives. And it kind of makes you wonder, what other colonial sources can we find these rich Indigenous stories if, we just pay a little bit more attention. So anyways, these were just my thoughts and reflections watching the video, and we'd love to hear what your thoughts were. So what came to you watching the video? Were there any questions you were left with? Let us know. And thank you guys for watching.